On the day of our anniversary, my mother-in-law suddenly declared, "Transfer your business to my son, or you will regret it." I refused. She leaned in and whispered something to my husband, and in the next second, he struck me across the cheek. I screamed. The entire restaurant froze, but none more than my husband, because just then, someone walked into the room, and he went pale. And before we continue, please comment where you're watching this from. Enjoy the listening. The celebration had been in full swing. The restaurant, one of the city's trendiest spots, was glowing with lights and filled with fresh flowers. Jade smiled, playing the perfect hostess, trying to radiate joy. But inside, something felt off, like a storm waiting to break. 5 years of marriage with Blake, a milestone they celebrated with extravagance, just like everything else in their lives. Guests buzzed around them, clients, family, friends, clinking glasses and cheering for their happiness. Blake, as always, basked in attention, smiling his charming, confident smile. He embraced Jade and offered words of devotion, but she could see right through it. The spark in his eyes had long gone cold. Lately, he had been distant, moody, unpredictable. There were constant complaints, little jabs at her job, her clothes, her attitude. It all built up like rust inside a golden cage. And Margot, his mother, added fuel to the fire. Her judgmental stares, her controlling tone, her barely concealed contempt. She had never accepted Jade, never believed she was worthy of her son. But tonight, something in Margot's gaze was more than just disdain. It was a plan, a threat, veiled in luxury. Jade stole a glance at her. Margot sat at the head of the table like a throne, flawless silver hair, sharp eyes, a diamond necklace glittering against her throat. She whispered to Blake again. He nodded but refused to meet Jade's eyes. That moment, everything shifted. The atmosphere thickened. Toasts kept coming. Music played. People laughed. But for Jade, it all turned into background noise, hollow, distant. She smiled on cue, spoke when spoken to, but inside, she felt miles away. Ethan's voice echoed in her mind, her old friend, her lawyer. Your mother-in-law is dangerous, Jade. If Blake ever turns, it won't be by chance. It'll be her doing. Sign the prenup. Back then, she had laughed it off. But now, she wished she had listened. The evening dragged on until finally, it was time for the main toast. Blake stood up, lifted his glass, and turned to the crowd. Dear friends, today we celebrate 5 wonderful years together. I want to thank Jade for her love, her support, for always being by my side. His words were smooth, rehearsed, but hollow. He turned toward Margot and handed her the floor. She rose slowly, her voice calm, confident, cutting through the noise like a blade. Today, she said, we celebrate not only a marriage, but a legacy. Jade tensed. Margot continued, as you all know, family is everything. Legacy is everything. And I believe it's time Jade made the right decision. She's had her time. She's been successful. But now, it's time to prioritize family. To think about the future. The children. The business. A hush fell over the room. Margot locked eyes with Jade. I believe it's time you transferred your business to Blake. Jade's heart pounded. No one spoke. No one moved. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes. But none were heavier than Margot's, cold, unwavering, expectant. Jade's silence was her answer. The guests froze, like frightened birds. Jade felt her cheeks flush with heat and disbelief. She had braced herself for many things, judgment, envy, even petty comments, but not this. Never this. Such audacity. Such betrayal. She had always known Margot didn't love her. But to orchestrate something so public, so humiliating, that was a level of cruelty she hadn't prepared for. Gathering all the strength inside her, Jade rose slowly from her seat. The hall seemed to shrink around her. Her voice, though quiet, cut through the silence like glass. I'm sorry, Margot, she said, steady and defiant, but I will not transfer my business to Blake. It is mine. I built it. It is my life, and I won't let anyone, not even you, take it away. A gasp rippled through the hall. Margot's face turned ashen, then red with fury. Her lips twitched. She leaned toward Blake and whispered something venomous. In the next moment, Blake lurched from his chair, eyes blazing, body trembling. "You'll regret this," he growled through clenched teeth. "You have no idea what it means to defy my mother." Before Jade could react, his hand lashed out. The slap was sharp and sudden. Her head snapped to the side. A scream escaped her lips. Her body stumbled backward, crashing against the edge of the table. Glass clinked. A centerpiece toppled. Pain radiated from her cheek, and darkness crept into the corners of her vision. She looked up at Blake, stunned, broken-hearted. He had hit her. In front of everyone. On their anniversary. And no one moved. No one spoke. Jade stood again, dizzy and numb, her pride the only thing holding her upright. The room was silent. Statues, not people, surrounded her. One guest lifted a phone, silently recording. The scent of perfume clashed with the metallic taste of humiliation. Blake, breathing hard, looked like a man lost in his own rage. But for a flicker of a second, regret flashed across his face. He hadn't expected to go that far. But Margot looked satisfied. Her lips curled into a subtle, poisonous smile. Her plan had unfolded exactly as she wished. And just when Jade thought she was truly alone, when the shame felt unbearable, the restaurant doors opened. Every head turned. Ethan walked in. He was tall, composed, dressed in a tailored navy blue suit that commanded attention. A sleek leather briefcase swung at his side. His gaze swept the hall like a scalpel, sharp, calculated, unwavering. He walked through the frozen crowd without hesitation. Each step rang out in the tense silence. Reaching Jade, Ethan offered a slight nod. His eyes met hers, warm and unwavering. No words, just presence. Steady, strong, undeniable. Then he turned, and his warmth turned to ice. Facing Blake, he looked down, not just in stature, but in power. "Blake," Ethan said. His voice, calm and resonant, cracked through the air like a judge's gavel. "You have just violated 3 clauses of the prenuptial agreement." The color drained from Blake's face. Until now, he had relied on his mother's promises, never bothering with the details. And now, those details had come back to haunt him. Margot hissed from behind. "What are you talking about? What agreement?" Her voice was still trying to maintain control, but it faltered. Ethan slowly turned to her. There was no fear in his eyes. Only cold resolve. "Margot," he said, his voice like winter, "I strongly advise you not to interfere. Anything you say now can and will be used against you in court." Margot's lips clamped shut. She knew Ethan's reputation, and she knew when she was cornered. Turning back to Blake, Ethan continued, "You struck Jade in public. That alone is a violation. But it also triggers the clauses that revoke your claim to all shared assets, freeze access to joint accounts, and authorize emergency divorce proceedings, effective immediately. And you," he added, stepping closer, "will be facing criminal charges if she chooses to press them." No one in the room dared breathe. The queen had fallen. The king was dethroned. And Jade, bruised, but unbroken, was no longer standing alone. Blake's face twisted in horror. Only now did he seem to grasp the seriousness of what had just occurred. One reckless moment, one act of violence, and he had shattered everything. His power, his marriage, his image, it all lay in ruins at his feet. Ethan reached calmly into his briefcase and pulled out a neat stack of papers. He extended them to Blake without ceremony. "This is a termination notice for the prenuptial agreement," he said evenly. "Prepared and signed by Jade before tonight's event, right before the divorce process officially began. Please review and sign." Blake stared at the documents, his hands trembling as he took them. His mind reeled. Moments ago, he was untouchable. Now, he stood helpless and disgraced, reduced to a defeated shell under the gaze of a man who had upended his world with quiet precision. Margot opened her mouth, trying to salvage the unraveling situation, but Ethan silenced her with a simple gesture. "Margot," he warned, "I won't repeat myself. Any further interference will only make things worse for your son." Margot clenched her jaw. Her power had dissolved as swiftly as Blake's. And Jade, who had stood in silence, observing, finally felt her strength return. The shame, the pain, the confusion gone. She was no longer a victim. She had someone on her side. She had clarity. Slowly, she raised her head and looked at Ethan. Gratitude and something deeper shimmered in her eyes. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, her voice quiet but strong. He gave her a soft smile. "Always happy to help, Jade," he replied. She reached for her handbag, her movements calm and deliberate. Glancing at the crowd, she saw their faces, astonishment, discomfort, even sympathy. But she said nothing. Words were no longer necessary. Jade turned and walked toward the exit, her back straight, her pace steady. She paused only once, right in front of Blake. He stood hunched, his eyes downcast, tears forming. "Goodbye, Blake," she said. No malice. No anger. Only weariness. Then she turned and walked away, Ethan beside her. Their heels echoed across the marble, the sound a rhythm of closure. Outside, the night was crisp. Jade inhaled deeply. The weight on her chest, the fear, the pressure, it lifted. She was free. Ethan opened the car door for her. She slid in, exhaling. "Where to?" he asked as he settled behind the wheel. Jade hesitated, then answered, "Home. I want to go home." The engine purred, and the car glided forward, carrying them away from the wreckage of her past. Neither of them spoke on the drive. Jade leaned her head against the window, watching the city slip by, the neon lights blending with her memories, 5 years of love and disillusionment, laughter and regret. She knew nothing would ever be the same, and she was okay with that. They arrived at her apartment. Ethan followed her to the door. She stopped, turned to face him. "Thank you, Ethan," she repeated. "You've helped me more than you know." He shook his head gently. "There's no need to thank me, Jade. I'll always be here for you." Then, after a pause, he added, "You know, I've always believed you deserve better." Jade looked at him, searching his face. In his gaze, she didn't just see loyalty. She saw care. Real care. Her heart thudded once, unexpectedly. "I know," she whispered. "And I hope that one day I'll find it." Ethan smiled. "You will," he said. "But tonight, you need to rest." He leaned in and kissed her cheek, tender, unhurried. "Good night, Jade." She nodded. "Good night, Ethan." She opened the door and stepped inside. Ethan waited until the door closed before turning back toward his car. Meanwhile, Jade stood in the hallway, the kiss still warm on her cheek. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in bed, eyes open, heart restless. Thoughts of Ethan swirled in her mind, his steady voice, his protective presence, the look in his eyes. It stirred something unfamiliar in her, something hopeful and frightening. She had built walls for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. But now, the cracks were there. The feelings were growing. She didn't know where it would lead, but she knew this. She was strong. She deserved love. And she was ready, finally, to fight for it. A week passed in heavy anticipation, like the silence before a storm. Jade had been staying at Ethan's apartment temporarily, safe, but not entirely at ease. The space was warm, the energy calm, and Ethan was a perfect host, respectful, quiet, never prying. But Jade couldn't shake the feeling that she was intruding, even though he never once made her feel unwelcome. Still, there was no time for guilt. The legal storm had just begun. Early Monday morning, while the city still slept under dim skies, someone knocked at Blake's apartment door. He opened it, bleary-eyed in stained pajamas, reeking of old whiskey and regret. And there, standing firm at the threshold, was a court bailiff with 2 official witnesses. He held a sealed envelope and a clipboard. "Blake Carter," the bailiff announced, reading in a practiced monotone. "You are hereby summoned to appear in court for the dissolution of your marriage to Jade Carter. Furthermore, you are temporarily restricted from accessing any managerial or financial functions of Carter Design Group, effective immediately." Blake blinked, confused. "What? No, wait." But the bailiff had already handed him the documents and turned away. Every restriction, every clause was detailed in sharp, unforgiving legal terms. Hearing the commotion, Margot rushed out in a silk robe. She snatched the summons from her son's hand and waved it furiously. "What is this? What the hell is going on?" she shrieked. The bailiff, unfazed, stepped back. "Everything is explained in the documentation, ma'am." And just like that, he left. Margot spun on Blake, her face twisted with rage. You fool. I warned you. Warned you she was planning something. And you just let her walk out with everything. Blake stood there mute, clutching the papers, the walls of his life closing in. His power, his control, his pride all gone. Later that day, Ethan met Jade at a quiet cafe near her office. He looked relaxed, confident. Blake received the summons, he said, taking a sip of his coffee. The restriction is in place. Everything went exactly as planned. Jade let out a long, slow breath. Thank you, she said. I mean it. I couldn't have done this without you. Ethan smiled. It's not just me. You prepared for this. That prenup, airtight. Strategic. Honestly, it's one of the most solid cases I've handled in years. Jade nodded, remembering everything that had brought her to this point. Margot's constant belittling, her calculated disdain, her manipulative whispers to Blake. The mocking remarks about Jade's success, the accusations of gold-digging. Jade had anticipated this battle long ago. She had worked with Ethan to quietly separate her assets, company shares, accounts, properties, placing them under trusted legal protection. The prenuptial agreement had mapped out every potential move, every outcome. And now that foresight had saved her, Margot will retaliate, Ethan warned. She's already trying. She'll call every lawyer she knows, pull every string she can find. But it's no use. There's nothing left to challenge. And indeed, Margot launched her offensive. Phone calls, complaints, legal motions. She screamed to every authority willing to listen, accusing Jade of fraud, manipulation, even emotional abuse. But her claims collapsed under scrutiny. Every legal expert she approached reviewed the contract and shook their heads. The court rejected her arguments outright. There were no cracks to exploit. She had lost. Margot was livid. She wasn't just angry, she was humiliated. Her reputation, her influence, her status, all threatened by a woman she had underestimated. Blake fared no better. Stripped of control and abandoned by most of his former allies, he spiraled. Days turned into weeks of isolation. He drank until he forgot what day it was. He cursed Jade, blamed her, accused her of orchestrating his downfall. But deep down, he knew he had done this to himself. Meanwhile, Jade soared. With her toxic ties severed, her energy surged. She poured herself into her work, fueled by vision and freedom. She launched new projects, expanded her brand, opened a second branch in another city. The response was overwhelming. Customers flocked to the new location. Her name, once tethered to Blake's legacy, now stood on its own, stronger than ever. And through it all, Ethan remained by her side, quietly watching, always ready if she needed him. One evening, after a long day buried in meetings and creative pitches, Ethan showed up outside Jade's office with a gentle smile. I want to show you something, he said, a trace of mystery in his voice. Intrigued and slightly amused, Jade followed him. They drove out of the city, winding past streets she didn't recognize, until they arrived at a quiet riverside restaurant, tucked between flowering bushes and old stone paths. The breeze carried the scent of blossoms and distant water. A table was waiting, secluded, candlelit, overlooking the glowing river. Baby, this is very beautiful, Jade whispered, her eyes lingering on the view, the flickering candles, the intimacy of it all. Ethan took her hand gently. I know how much you've been through lately, he said. I've seen you suffer. I've watched you fight. And every step of the way, I've admired your strength, your resilience. Jade looked up, her gaze locking with his. In his eyes, she saw everything she hadn't dared to hope for. Kindness, patience, admiration, and something deeper that made her chest tighten. Jade, Ethan continued, I've wanted to tell you this for a while now. You're very dear to me, not just as a friend, but as a woman. His voice trembled slightly, not with doubt, but sincerity. Jade remained silent for a long moment. Her heart was torn between longing and fear. She had been burned before. Trusting someone again, letting someone in, felt like stepping toward fire barefoot. Ethan, sensing her hesitation, squeezed her hand softly. Don't rush, he said. I'm not asking for an answer. I just wanted you to know how I feel. And I'll wait, as long as you need. That night, they talked for hours. About everything. Work, dreams, childhood memories, places they wanted to visit. Laughter came easily, and for the first time in months, Jade felt light, truly light, as if the weight she had carried for so long had quietly slipped off her shoulders. She realized something vital. Life hadn't stopped after the divorce. It had only just begun. Months passed. The divorce was finalized. Jade stood before the court, calm and composed, as the judge declared her a free woman. Blake lost everything. Not only the company, not just the wealth, but the illusion of control. Margot, despite her desperate maneuvering, could do nothing. Jade emerged as the sole owner of her business, free, untouchable, and unafraid. And she had done it not through revenge, but through wisdom, preparation, and self-respect. She had proven something not to Margot, not to Blake, but to herself, that no matter how broken things had seemed, no matter how betrayed she'd felt, she had the strength to rise, to survive, to rebuild. Her happiness was her own to claim now, on her terms. She poured her energy into growth, opening 2 more branches, mentoring young women entrepreneurs, traveling, giving talks. Her name became more than a brand. It became a symbol of empowerment. And slowly, Jade's heart softened. She began to see Ethan not just as a protector or friend, but as a man who had waited patiently, who had never pushed, never expected, only offered. She started letting him in, bit by bit. Dinners turned to weekend getaways. Work meetings turned into long walks. And every time he looked at her, it wasn't with expectation, it was with belief. Belief in her. She still had fears, still had wounds, but she also had hope. And in Ethan, she saw not just safety, but the promise of a new beginning. A future that didn't erase the past, but honored it, healed from it, and grew stronger because of it. She was ready to love again, ready to trust, ready to build not a perfect life, but a real one.